Ladies and gentlemen, you are now tuned into Mogul Talk, a podcast that serves as a canvas for entrepreneurs to share their triumphs and struggles on their journey to becoming the moguls of tomorrow.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode
Mogul Talk,
of
talk, talk.
Mogul Talk.
Yo, first and foremost, RIP DMX. Shout out to the Rough Rider, shout out to Swiss Beats, shout out to New York. He is a anointed individual who unfortunately, struggled with all the substance abuse that he had, but he really literally changed the game. And for anyone, who's young, and I'm considered in this as well because, he pretty much held the 90s down. You really can't feel the influence that he had unless you were in that era, born in that era, and lived through the times where he dropped two albums in 1 year, because he was so hungry, or the times when he was not getting paid by the label, and so he decided to do movies so the label wouldn't get any money. DMX was an icon, and to this day was creating viral moments, even when it comes to the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, singing that shit. So your RIP to DMX because he really is an icon, and he transcends music, transcends life. Anywhere around the world, they'll know who he is. And it also, you could see clearly from that Woodstock video that he has, where it's always DMX performing in front of the entire world. Like, that goes to show that DMX was a beast that, cannot be tamed. RIP to a real one.
Yo, honestly, we're not wasting any time when it comes to the show. We're getting right into it. And like Church said, RIP DMX. I think that for the culture and where we are, obviously this past year has been very numbing. And we've kind of grown to not feel so hard when we lose somebody because the worst, if they would say, has already happened, right? It's happened in our personal lives. It's happened to us professionally. It's happened to us with our goats. We're seeing people leave, like a Kobe last year. To see DMX go, definitely heartbreaking. And the way that he went out,
Right.
and just the conversation that the outsiders that aren't a part of the culture have about DMX passing, and their thoughts on his drug addiction and what that meant for him. My only thought process is nobody understands how hard it is to battle an addiction. Nobody understands how hard it is to overcome that addiction multiple times and still try to say that you're making it and do that and it be in a public eye. And amidst all the scrutiny and all the difficulties that DMX had, he really stood strong. And I, in my personal opinion, and just the people that I've chopped it up around this conversation, it's really like it doesn't matter the way he went, right? And I watched that Noriega interview with him, and he was just like, yo, if I was to drop dead tomorrow, like, I've lived a good life. I missed all the struggles and difficulties that he faced. He felt like he lived a good life. And I think that for me personally, I'm definitely coming more to terms with death and the idea of death. And I think a lot of us who are living look at death as our finality, right? And it's true. You're no longer here on this earth, but it's the beginning of new life. And, DMX's spirituality spoke through anybody who he talked to, anybody that who knew him personally, even the people who saw him on social media, right? Remember Sunday service, Coachella, the prayer that he did. He was going around with Kanye and just doing prayers before the shows. He was preaching on Instagram. He was preaching on Twitter. He was on YouTube doing videos, talking about God's word and praying. Like, it does not matter what you do because his impact is definitely going to be felt forever. But they always going to honor and respect his spirituality and what that meant amidst going through that stuff. Like, it's very difficult, and to be addicted to drugs and face all these issues, and you're still like faithful, and that God has a plan for you, and you trust in the process, and you trust in his will and trust in his way. And it's like, yo, that's the truth of the human experience, right? We all come short. We all come short of the glory of God, but He still loves us, and we're still here to tell the story. And while you're here and you're living, you have breath in your body, and you still got the opportunity to tell that story. That's what makes a difference.
Absolutely, man. And Nas said it best. A baby is born the same time a man is murdered, the beginning and end. It is a cycle that we do live. One thing that I didn't like also is that every time, when DMX first got into that coma from I believe it was a heart attack, everybody was like, I'm not surprised. Oh, I'm not surprised. Like, yeah, I wasn't surprised either, but it was still messed up. Like, it's still fucked up that DMX was going through that.
And it's
And
still
then when he did die, people
disrespectful.
were like, oh, like, wow, like, not finally, but like, oh, I'm not surprised. Like, it was gonna happen. Yeah, we all knew that, but still, it doesn't mitigate the pain, it doesn't lessen the blow that everybody was feeling. And he wasn't one of my favorite rappers, but I know that he was on people's top fives. And people say that if you're not a real hip hop fan unless DMX is on your top 10. You don't know hip hop unless he is on your top 10. That's what people say. So I know his influence shattered everything.
Hmm.
His influence shattered so much that people forgot about Prince Andrews or Prince Philip, whatever Prince his name is, died. He died the same day. Yeah, like,
Prince
and
Philip,
nobody talk. I'm
yeah.
sure they're tight. I'm sure they're so tight that a black man um overtook the media sensation for the death. And there's a video also of Charlemagne, like, on the street. They're talking about DMX, and he was like, "Yo, he's an icon. If he dies today, like, he will be trending #1 on Twitter." And it's a fact. Like, he was that beast. Um, DMX also, he pretty much tied himself with Murder Inc. and like Irv Gotti and Ja Rule and Swiss Beats. Like, the people he was around are legends too. And Swiss Beats, transition
True.
to Swiss Beats, one of the best modern moguls of our time. Him and Timberland are killing it, with when it comes to verses. And simple idea that just rose up when back I think in like 2005, 2006, Swiss Beats on Summer Jam brought out Kanye, and they had a back and forth battle. You could watch the video on YouTube now, and it's hella crazy. And then in like 2019, I went to Summer Jam where Swiss Beats was performing, and he brought out Timberland that day, and they did a battle back and forth. And honestly, Swiss Beats like beat him in my opinion. Like, maybe because we were in New York, and we just had that bias. But Swiss Beats was going crazy, and with COVID, that they decided to put it on Instagram, Swiss versus Timberland, and
And it's crazy because they was like, I remember that day because I was on Twitter and they were like, yo, Timbaland's on Instagram with Swiss Beats, and I think they like Timbaland was playing beats on his live, and then he added Swiss Beats to his live. Then they were playing beats back and forth, and it was going until like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning Eastern Standard Time, like here. And I stood up and watched it, and I was like, yo, this is literally like unbelievable that like something of this magnitude happened. And like, you look at verses and look at how many opportunities have come out of verses, right? That first it started off verses by themselves, then they got
yeah,
Ciroc
because
partnership, then they got
the
Apple
production
Music.
value was low as hell in the beginning. It's just
It started off with them like not having really good sound and audio quality. They were playing the audio in speakers in the same room, and you were
you
like
you can't
struggling to
even hear the
hear the
song.
songs. Like, that's when they was doing the gospel verses, like Fred Hammond and Kirk Franklin, Hezekiah Walker, and everything. And then it was the very first one with Fred Hammond and Kirk Franklin, where Kirk Franklin brought people to the same studio, and they were doing that. And then that's when they got the partnership with Apple Music, and it was streaming on Apple Music, and you were able to watch it. And then production value stepped up, and then they started doing the most, right? They were struggling to get there on time. It was on CP time, everything that came with it. But they had some really good verses, and honestly, one of the best verses with DMX, Snoop
Legendary.
Dogg. I was so intrigued and happy to see them reshare that whole live and gave people the opportunity to just watch it again and watch the magnitude of how important it is. And honestly, even up to date, with the most recent one with Earth, Wind, and Fire, it was so beautiful. And I just really think about what Versus provides. It provides an opportunity for our legends in our community to show off. You know what I mean? Like, give them their flowers while they're here. Like, you think of DMX, like, I'm so glad he got those flowers when we did the verses. In the midst of a pandemic, people appreciated his work and his music. Like, you think of all the artists that go on who don't get their flowers until long after they've passed on. And, you know, to see Earth, Wind, and Fire, Isley Brothers go back and forth, it was truly beautiful what they've created with this platform.
The Isley Brothers and Earth, Wind, and Fire one was definitely a celebration that they put on. And they're all celebrations, you know. I think the first single camera versus was actually Bounty Killer and a Beanie Man, and they were in like Jamaica. And then in Jamaica, like you can't really make that much
Yeah.
loud noise without like a permit or something like that. And they were going crazy in the living room, and the police came and they're like, "Yo, what are you doing? You can't have this." And then I think Bounty Killer was like, "Yo, we have like 500,000 people watching right now. Don't be that guy." Like right on live, like while the cops are in there, mad funny. And then they just kept going, and people said that that one. I didn't watch it. I just saw the clips, but people said that one was like super duper lit. Like at the time, it like superseded everything. And that's what I see them continuing to do, topping each one after another. They even went so as far as getting Gucci Mane and Young Jeezy. Gucci Mane, who killed Young Jeezy's boy, and then made a song about it, and then even performed that song in front of Young Jeezy. And Young Jeezy still like extended the olive branch, which is wild. Like if you were in 2005, you would think these two guys in the same room, they would kill each other. Um,
Would never be. I mean, if you look at
yes,
Ashanti
yes,
and
yes,
Keisha
yes.
Cole, you know, like perfect example. Like the pairings are so like dope. Like I'm just like when you think about it, and then it's like people start to have conversations about who they want to see in verses, like who some of their favorite artists. Like I think we got coming up Method Man and Redman next week. And then I think there's who else is lined up? We just had what Raekwon
Yep,
the
yep.
Chef and Ghostface Killer recently. They got SWV and Escape versus Escape, and honestly, I'm gonna just sit here and say thank you to Versus for sharing the kid, okay? Because not only did you give them an opportunity, you gave the kid an opportunity. All right, I was so geeked on that day when I looked at my phone and I was like, "Yo, you're lying that Swiss Beats shared my
So wild.
video. Like, we could not make this up. So wild. Like me and Kevin were texting about it, and we were just like, yo, like he legitimately had to go in your Instagram profile to see this whole video. And I'm
And
like,
he had
yo,
to have
that
liked
ass,
it. And
bro.
he honestly he had to have loved it. Think about all the shit he probably sees it all the time. Then he heard that and was like, yo, what the hell? And that's what I love to see because you know you've been uh doing your tracks every Friday for a few weeks now, like a few months, and it goes to show you that consistency is key. You know, that's like the Russ method where he put out a song every week for like 3 years and then now he's put on, you know, Andrew Schultz put out a joke every week, a new joke every week and on YouTube, and it ended up being he's a bigger comedian. You know, that consistency and that work ethic is what will put you on top. And that goes the same with verses
Yeah,
itself. You know, when it comes to timing and execution, that's how you can have a great product because they ended up selling the product to Triller and connecting with Apple Music, and then now even Peloton, and now they have commercials of Peloton where everyone is riding their bike, and the first Peloton is going to be Brandy versus I forgot who did Brandy verse? Monica.
Monica. That was a crazy
That one
versus,
had
yo.
memes.
Brandy and Monica, they hated each other, bro.
Yo, they be connecting.
Oh
They
my
be
gosh.
severing, not severing ties, but
Yeah, but you know
healing.
what I love too is
Go
they're
ahead.
de- no, true. They are healing, and they are taking the Jay Z title approach, which I love. With this new partnership that they have with Triller, is that all the participants in the verses from now going forward, and even the ones in the past, they are getting
Yes.
an equity share in Triller as a company. So it's like we're giving them their flowers. They're getting an opportunity in COVID because let's be honest, most of these people that are in the verses, they're not saying that they're washed up, but they're definitely further along in their careers where they're making most of their money not off of music that they're creating now, but older music. So they will go on tours with this music. They travel the world with this music. So because of the pandemic, they're not able to do that. So how is it a way where you can find yourself making some money consistently? And it's like, hey, you know what? Let me do verses. I'm gonna get a check. I'm gonna get an equity share in a company that's making money, and then just let it cake up. Simple as that. And that's what they did with Tidal. Remember the inaugural Tidal, a launch where like Kanye and
Madonna,
Beyonce,
Dead
and all
Mouse,
of them
Nicki, I
was
think,
on
Lil
stage.
Wayne.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that was
Nicki.
like, and people
Yep.
kind of didn't like that because Jay-Z was like, "Oh, we're putting more money to the artist," and on the face, it's like, "Oh, you just care about these top people," but in the end, Tidal ended up being the streaming service that gives you the best royalty. And he was thinking about the artist, like, "Yo, I'm gonna give you a piece of this, because." All the white people are making money off of you. I want you to make money off your own product. You have PNB Rock who wants to buy out, and this happens to every rapper when they're not as hot anymore, but they want to get get out of their label and buy their own contract but the label's not going to let them because they didn't fulfill the entire contract. The money they got in the beginning of that $10 million deal is just a loan that you have to recoup. And but if you own your shit, you're not going to have to worry about that. You're not going to have to um make sure that the label gets their money first and you have to get the crumbs. And so it is awesome that Jay-Z was doing that. And people was clowning Jay-Z like, "Oh wow, another streaming service. Oh, yo, you're gonna charge me $15? Oh, $20? Like what the hell?" But Tidal ends up having the best high fidelity audio experience, and he bought it, I think.
Yep. True. And now even so much so that like Spotify launched their own hi-fi, or they're in the process of launching. It's about to drop in the next couple of months. They're doing their own hi-fi plan that's upgrading to the prices, right? So you think of like when Jay-Z announces the Title, and look at where the economy was when Title first dropped. It was like, oh, okay, people were not looking for that exclusivity when it comes to music, because with the streaming era, there was no more exclusivity, right? It's like, oh, the song is out, it's on Apple Music, it's on Spotify, in SoundCloud, it's on iTunes, or so it's everywhere, right? But gone were the days where you only can get an album from a specific place, right? Remember, you can only
Yep.
get the album, like they would do special drops in FYE or Best Buy, and it's like, okay, I'll do a drop, but this drop is only going to feature on Tidal, or it's only going to be feature on Apple Music. Look, Chance the Rapper dropped Coloring Book only on Apple Music.
Yeah, nah.
Where was the exclusivity there, and people used to give him they used to give him no, they didn't even give him that much shit. They were okay with the fact that he did that because he was independent. He forged a partnership and deal with Apple Music, so he was able to get some money out of it. So they weren't even shitting on him like that. But like, I know a lot of people were pissed off that they couldn't go listen to Encore 100 times on Apple Music anymore on Spotify, and that they had to buy Tidal just to listen to Jay-Z's discography. And that also just showed like how much juice Jay had to say, you know what? Boom, I'm starting my own streaming service. Y'all want to listen to my music? Y'all got to pay me to listen to my music and pay me directly to do so.
Absolutely, and it also happened to Lil Wayne. He had the Free Wheezy album. It was exclusive on Tidal, and you could only get it there. Kanye West, Life of Pablo, when it dropped, it was exclusive on Tidal for like 20 to 25 weeks. It wasn't until he did the final version with all the edits, because the original Life of Pablo when it dropped is different from what you would get on streaming services right now. And the only way to
It's different
yeah,
from what's
it's
there now.
different
Yeah.
different transitions, different additions of things. Like before, the song Wolves didn't have the Sia and Vic Mensa verse on the album. When he first dropped the song on SNL, they were there, but then when he dropped the album, they weren't on it. And then people were kind of tight, so he tweeted like, "I'ma fix Wolves," and then he updated it and put Sia and Vic Mensa on it. And
He
he
changed
changed fame. He changed
Famous.
almost every single song. And like even now when I listen to it, because I've listened to Life of Pablo hundreds and hundreds of times, I remember like the changes because I'm like, oh, here comes a change right now. Here comes a change right now. And so, and people didn't like that either. And Kanye did eventually add it to other streaming services, and that even ended up in there being a lawsuit, a class action lawsuit against Kanye. But his argument, his lawyer's argument, which is a good argument, is like, because he said that Kanye also tweeted, Life of Pablo will never ever be on anything else. It'll be on Tidal only forever. And obviously he had to go back on his word because he ended up not wanting Tidal anymore, and he gave up his equity in it. But then his lawyer's argument was like, oh, the album that was on other streaming services wasn't the original album. It's a different album now because all of
The
the edits.
original album.
But people were clowning Jay-Z on the terms of like, oh, this is not gonna work. It's not gonna, make money because he bought it. He actually bought it at a pretty cheap price. I think it was like $50 million. Like to buy a whole streaming service, like I think that's pretty good price. And he ended up selling a third to Sprint like 2 years later for like $100 million or like $150 million, and that pretty much tripled his profit. He tripled like what the evaluation of it and was able to
Mm-hmm.
sell 30% of it. And now you see him selling it to Twitter, the majority of it, for $297 million, and
Yep.
completely a success. That's how you make business moves. And Jay-Z, one of my inspirations of all time, with his business move, selling Moet, 50% of that. It's incredible. It's incredible. And so like I would never clown Jay-Z for the business moves that he be making. Um, and I'm sure he's had failures. I'm sure he's had
No, you
failures,
have
but
none.
the good ones, I know he's balling now. He's on that Billy move. He's gonna be a billionaire. Pretty much there already.
You know, you gotta give respect where respect is due, and don't get me wrong. There's a conversation Kanye, uh, Diddy, Jay Z, the hip hop billionaires or whatever the case may be. They're already surpassing where other artists and rappers and hip hop entrepreneurs have not reached the level. You know what I mean? And I think because of the fact that hip hop is on the verge of we're not far off from hip hop turning what 50 years of hip hop.
1979, I
And
think
when
it's
you think about it,
1979.
we're
So
1979, so we're about 8 years off
yeah, yeah.
from hip hop turning 50. So we're actually getting to a point where hip hop has been here for a very substantial period of time, and we're going through transitions of hip hop, and now our goats that were coming up, young bulls, are now super established. And you think of what opportunities were created for them that they have opportunities now to create for other rappers. And there was so many rappers and producers and hip hop entrepreneurs that did not see the same fate that Jay-Z has seen, or Diddy or Kanye, because they didn't do the same type of business moves. But you look at where everybody else is right now, everybody else is trying to do that with their money. You look at Rick Ross, you look at Drake, you look at Travis Scott. Travis Scott had more collaborations in 2020 than
Yep.
he had music, right? More partnerships, more opportunities, right? And you're building equity stake because look at where we are with the pandemic. We realize live touring can shut down any second, right? You can drop music, but your music might not get as much play because people are at home. People listen to music when they're outside. They listen to music when they go to clubs. They listen to music when they go to events and stuff like that, or when they're commuting to work. But when they're not commuting, what are they listening to? They saw that streaming numbers went down. So it's like, how do you create longevity and make sure you still have money in your pockets? And like look at opportunities like Tidal. You look at opportunities like Versus. You look at opportunities where you can have more brand partnerships. And why everybody's over here trying to be an influencer TikTok star is because you got to figure out how you're going to make money and be malleable in ever changing landscape of hip hop. And I really think about it too, like, yo, if it wasn't for Tidal and what Jay-Z did over there, would we be seeing more streaming services, or will we be seeing like TikToks and Triller take a streaming service approach, right? You look at how people are releasing music exclusively to TikTok and Tidal and TikTok and Triller and platforms like that. That laid the groundwork for that. The app like Tidal laid the groundwork for us to be able to do that. Like record labels are working in direct partnership with TikTok and Triller and stuff like that. So you look at the groundwork that we lay and the culture and how important the culture is to business and the moves that we make, and it's just like we really gotta, if we're not seeing it, like we're stepping up and seeing it now, we really need to step up and see how influential we are to this country and to this world. Because if we don't, we're just gonna continue living in this like box of like never seeing, like going outside of the box that we've already been in. Like it's really time for us to step up and step
Absolutely. And
out.
another important thing is because we want to own everything that we make, but there are times that you can't do everything on your own. You'll see like on woke Twitter, or not woke Twitter, business Twitter, and people on what's that thing? What's that on Clubhouse be like, yo, you got to own everything you do. Most of these people own
Mm-hmm.
100% of nothing. Yeah, they own 100% of whatever they're talking about, but it's nothing at the moment. Sometimes you do have to, collab with something. I'm gonna give you an example. Steve Stout, owner of United Masters, the company right now that is trying to put on, more independent artists and having them own their masters. He just developed a partnership with Apple Music, $100 million, for
Apple
marketing,
Music,
for
yep.
promotional use,
Mm-hmm.
for developing artists, whatever it may be. And Steve Stout had to work his way up to there. He is actually from the 90s. He failed a bunch of times. He failed on a few record labels. I think he tried to pull out a vodka or something that failed. He did something in sports that failed, and now he's just building this United Masters at 50 years old. He's just beginning. He believes he's just beginning. He has a great interview on the Breakfast Club that came out recently when he was talking about his partnership with Apple, and he was just saying that like, yo, I'm still running this, but I just got the money, and I'm still gonna make sure that my artists are gonna own everything that they made. And it takes a pioneer like that to be able to create a product. Because having a record deal is an avenue to become a star. Being independent is an avenue that you can choose.
Mm-hmm.
Joining United Masters is a avenue that you can use. But it's not, those all a avenue might not work for everyone. You know, and so it's just beautiful to see that he knew that we need to change the way the record label industry is working. Again, like I said, PNB Rock, he is still on his label because he wants to buy his contract out, but he is not going to have the money enough to recoup, to give that company whatever, how much his contract was worth. And so if I'm an artist, why would I sign a $10 million record deal if I haven't even established? I got one hit song, but I don't know how long that's gonna last, how many more of those I can make. I'm not gonna join a record label like an Atlantic. I'm gonna want to join United Masters. So I know, okay, I got this one hit song. I'm not gonna lose any money. I'm gonna get some money, and if I make a second song and it flops, I'm still good. I'm still good. I'm still gonna own my masters. I'm still not gonna owe money to someone and then be a slave to a record label. It is a dated concept. I think it's just better probably to try and develop yourself, like the Mac Miller approach. He dropped 5 albums and then he signed, I think, to Def Jam, or maybe it was Atlantic. I'm not sure, but it wasn't until 5 albums. He was independent up until then. And it's just nah, Steve Stout is just a visionary, and I can't wait to see what else he has for United Masters itself, because it could end up being the biggest thing as more independent artists come to fame.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot more platforms like this that are catering to providing opportunities for artists and creators to be independent and get money and get compensated properly for their work. And you brought up a really important part. First off, Clubhouse. There's a lot of
Capping,
cap in
capping.
Clubhouse. We were talking about this on the Drew episode. We talked about this on one of the beginning episodes, right? But a true thing that I'm starting to realize, and this is me, this is what, 7 years come August of Roundtable and working, as a company. And I realized that at a young age, I was so focused on having possession and ownership of something that I never really learned how to be a part of something other than what I own and what I ran, right? And when it comes down to it, sometimes you need to work on that in some type of infrastructure and learn the ways of the business that you're trying to get into, because of the fact that there are certain lessons that you need to learn. And 7 years in the game, I've learned a lot of lessons across during that timeline, but I also realized that I missed out on a lot of opportunities for me and my personal development. Right, the business grew and opportunities came, but my personal development in the process, I stunted my growth a little bit because I was so focused on having ownership of this company or the next company or doing this and trying to flaunt that entrepreneurship. And don't get me wrong, this show, Mogul Talk Podcast, is literally a canvas for entrepreneurs to share their trials and triumphs on the road to becoming the moguls of tomorrow, right? That's the tagline we came up with. But the truth and fact, everybody is not going to be an
Right.
entrepreneur. And that's a true conversation that we need to have, because we as a culture has fetishized ownership and saying, yeah, we all want our 40 acres and a mule. But also, some people can work and we can be a part of things and help build structure and create longevity without all of us wanting to be entrepreneurs, because then if everybody's an entrepreneur, then who's
Exactly. Yeah.
working? Right? If everybody's trying to be a mogul, who's doing the work? Nobody's going to be doing the work. So it really makes me think about, how important it is to kind of take that step back and have a sense of humility and think about like, hey, you know what? I need to be, hands on the ground. I'm not trying to be so focused on being a boss, because being a boss doesn't mean anything if you don't have true ownership of anything, right? And you look at all these entrepreneurs and creators that have done things in the past few years. A lot of those businesses have flopped. A lot of businesses have failed. And then suddenly they're not an entrepreneur anymore. They're moving on to the next thing. But true entrepreneurs are those people who fail, keep trying until something is successful, and that's what makes them successful. And we think about this. Me and you have talked about this so many times on the podcast. You look at Kendrick Lamar didn't get on until he was 27. J. Cole, same thing. Jay, same thing. We look at, even in the hip hop, like we look at all these like young rappers, and I think for our generation, like you look at a Pro Era, Joey Badass group, that whole team of like young, Odd Future, young rappers that have been on since they were 15, 16, and then they're just now hitting 26, 27, and they've been deep in the game. And then everybody in our generation feels like they're so behind because they've did it at such a young age. And it's like, nobody's behind here, not in rap, not in hip hop, not in life. Like, we're all here for a certain amount of time. And if like, the sudden passing of our family members and friends and even celebrities, you look at DMX, look at Kobe, there were people who had like full careers, people who really lived full lives, or some people who still haven't lived full lives, that life really caught up to them really fast, and that was it for them, right? And we think that we haven't reached the pinnacle of our level of success because somebody else did it, and we're so focused on other people's timelines.
Absolutely, man. Jay-Z said it best. First album 26, I ain't need no deal. And that's some words that I always live by. I always said, yo, I'm about to drop my first album at 26. Never happened, but it's all good. Yo, I'm telling you, Christmas R&B album produced by Julian coming soon. It's about to be lit. It's about to be love making all holiday long. But
We've been saying this for like 5 years. 5 years.
now I'm gonna wait till I'm 30 and drop
5 years.
the
This
30-year-old
Christmas album
rapper.
being honorable.
Nah, man, but
30-year-old rapper. I mean,
I just couldn't. I wouldn't be able to.
honestly though, like,
We wouldn't be able to do it like, because like there's like artists, Fivio Foreign, um, who made what song did he make? Now I can't think of, but he's a Brooklyn drill artist, and he's said he was like 23, but he's actually like 32. But he's making like, kid music, and that's all right. But if you're a 30-year-old rapper, I think you gotta like try and make something about like life or something conscious or something where you're describing how your life has gone, and then apply it and put it in words so everybody can relate, much like a Kendrick does. Kendrick is the GOAT, or Jay-Z, one of the GOAT rappers ever. um that's for rapping specifically. Unless you're like a producer and artist that can make like timeless music, that's what I think the avenue for a typical rapper should be. um Besides that, one thing that I want, when you brought up that, yo, it took round 7 years of Roundtable, and it's still developing to this day, and it will become something even greater in the future. Cryptocurrency, when that came to be, people wasn't jacking it. They were like, yo, it's not going to be a thing. It's just a fad. It's just a niche thing. Like the only thing that cryptocurrency is good for is for buying drugs online. And now 10, 12 years later, you got Coinbase, an app that is going to it's just the easiest way to buy cryptocurrency. But now you have other ways like Cash App. You could buy Bitcoin on Robinhood. Um, but Coinbase is gonna open up in the stock market at a potentially $100 billion value, which is like astronomical. And that will begin to legitimize cryptocurrency, something that probably will happen. The time will more than likely come where we won't use cash anymore. If you go to China, they don't use any cash. They use China Pay, and if you go, like my boy Tony, my roommate, he
Mm.
told me he went to China and he was there for a layover to go to Bali. He had some Chinese cash, and when he went to go buy something, they looked at him like he was dumb, and then they had to just go to the back. Took like 15 minutes to like get the change, and pretty much okay, and then gave him change. But it was like, what the heck? Everybody there just used China Pay, and that's what we're probably going to end up going to. And cryptocurrency with Coinbase becoming legitimate like that, that's pretty much what the future is going to be. I'm not an investor in cryptocurrency, not because I don't want to. I just slacked. I'm still slacking. You still could because Bitcoin just hit its all-time high again of 63,000 per share. Um, but uh, it is the future. It is the future. Whether it be Bitcoin, whether it be Dogecoin, whether it be Akon coin, which is what he's going to be using in Senegal, um, we it's going to be a legitimate thing, and you may find something that okay, it might not be as legitimate at the moment, but it can grow into something bigger, and that's with anything, with any product, with any company, with any person. Us, we're growing every day, learning new things every day, and we still aren't at our final form. And that's the same thing with a company. It's not at their final form if the execution is good.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. It brings me to that movie with Justin Timberlake. I don't know if it's called like Out of Time or
Timeless,
something. I don't know,
some shit like that. I know what
but
you're talking about. I've seen it.
it's a movie with Justin Timberlake, and he is living in a world where like your currency is the time on your life, and you want to have more experiences and do more things. You gotta spend your time of your life, and that's like how you do it. It's really crazy to think that we're moving to this world. Don't get me wrong. I feel like the currency of the dollar is really annoying because it can be have so much weight here and other countries not have any weight, right? Or other countries it has a lot of weight. But you think about it, it's still the same dollar that we're making here. And I would love to see a universal currency that we can use across the world. Like, who are we to determine, like, oh, just because you're an African nation that you can't have, like, we can't have this shared currency across the world, like whether you're a third world country, or a country like America, whatever I mean. But I think we got to start kind of preparing ourselves because we're moving into this completely digital age. Like, trains in here in New York, they're completely about to move away from the Metro card. It's all going to be virtual on your phone. You're going to just tap and get on public transportation. The same thing goes for you go in an airport. Your ticket is on your phone. You pay with Apple Pay. You pay with Samsung Pay. Whatever your thing is, your bank is all remote. Like it's all like I think of Monopoly, like Millennial Monopoly with like the debit cards and stuff like that. Like we're literally moving into that crazy age where like cash is becoming obsolete. And people would say that the pandemic is to blame, but I also just think that the pandemic just heightened things and sped up the process much faster.
Absolutely. I mean, I went to a restaurant on Saturday here in LA called Stella Barra, and right smack on the front of its menu, it says cashless restaurant. They don't want to accept any cash. They either want Apple Pay or use your debit card. And here in LA, in New York, I've noticed, I don't know about now, I haven't been there in 6 months, but in New York, I had noticed that a lot of places still will just take only cash. But here in LA, the Mexican guy selling hot dogs on the corner accepts Apple Pay. It's crazy. Like everybody, everywhere, the only person who's accepting cash is dispensaries, and that's just because they aren't federally like what's the word? Federally I forgot what the word is. Not mandated, federally when something is. regulated, federally regulated. It's not
Regulated?
federally regulated, and so uh, that they have to accept cash only. And if you do pay with your debit card, they'll just charge you a $3 fee because it's actually just like an ATM transaction, but they have like a little terminal, but it's still considered an ATM withdrawal. And like if your product was
Mm.
$43, they'll act like they took out 45 and they'll give you $2 back. And so everywhere in LA, it's pretty much cashless. Like some will accept it, but there's so many spots that be like, nah, debit card, what are you talking about? And so it is already happening. And cryptocurrency will fuel that need for having a universal currency. Because trust me, if we go to Europe, that dollar is weak as hell. But if we go to Colombia, we'll be living like kings. Um, and but the time will come.
Yeah, that's so crazy
Yeah,
to
it
think
is crazy,
about.
man. It is crazy. And one of the things is just buying the flight. But my dad even says, like, why did you move to LA? You should have moved to Colombia. You would have been living like a king, working from home, like paying like $300 a month for rent, and then you could do whatever the hell you want. And I was like, yo, you're right. I should have.
I mean, you should have. I mean, but also at the same time, like, you know, new experiences, like, that's the same way, like, there's so many people here in New York that are working remote because office buildings and places are closed, right, in the city. But they're still paying New York rent or mortgage and taxes and stuff like that because of the fact that, some a part of them doesn't want to leave. They
Absolutely.
like, and if that's the whole thing, right? This whole migration of people who are moving south to Georgia and all the people who are moving to the suburbs, like, you do that and the quality of living just totally changes. Like, it's not
Nah,
what you're
it's a
used to,
culture shock. It's a culture, I've lived those culture shocks. Like when I first went to Wisconsin, I went to college in Appleton, Wisconsin. So I went from the Big Apple to the Little Apple. Completely different, completely different. It was one of the first places where people didn't know I was Hispanic. Like they would just assume that I was black right away, and that was a shock to me as well because I had never lived that, living in New York. And so it's it is crazy, like people who are gonna move out. Even coming to LA, it was a culture shock, like different type of weather. Everybody just goes hiking, everybody's in yoga pants. Um, but it's dope. It's dope. I can't say. But everybody has to take that leap sometimes, they gotta want to try something new. And I'm happy I made that decision because I will come back to New York one day. Like it's my city until I die. Um, and like Kanye says, like my Maybach in NY, but it still got the Cali plates. Like I'll just be back and forth. It ain't nothing.
That's a fact. But I think that's a perfect place for us to end. I want to say thank you guys for listening and watching on the YouTube space. This has been another great episode of Mogul Talk podcast. If you haven't done so already, tap into our previous episodes. You can check out our episode with featured guest Kami Gomez, featured guest Drew DeLeon, and listen to some of our older episodes. Fuck
Whoa.
me.
And,
I messed up. All right, pick it up from there.
we also had
Yeah, you
Via
just take it, Kev.
Simone. We had Tiffany Patrice, aka Nomadic. So we've had a bunch of guests on the platform, and we're gonna have more coming soon. And so please, yeah, just tap in, check us out.
Yeah,
I think right now this is one of our best episodes that we recorded, especially since it's just us dolo. And so we're just gonna keep getting better and continue to deliver the case studies of like our inspirations, aka Jay-Z, aka Swiss Beats, aka Steve Stout, or any other mogul that continues to make those business moves.
Kanye West. Any other
You know,
entrepreneur,
and that's what we need to do. We need to deliver those case
honestly,
studies to show that the proof is in the pudding. And that's how we learn more, and that's how we do it.
if
Yeah,
you do the
you
work.
know. I go by the name of Church. It's
I go by the name of King Jules, and like I said before, thank you guys for listening. We appreciate you. This has been another great episode of Mogul Talk. Much love, peace to you all.
peace.
Follow us on Instagram at Mogul Talk Podcast and on Twitter at Mogul Talk Pod. Be sure to find us anywhere you listen to podcasts, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor.fm, or Stitcher. Look us up in your search tab by typing in Mogul Talk.